Hello, welcome to Talking Racine. We've got a very interesting discussion this evening. I'm Dr. Ken Jorgen, your host, and our guest this evening is Mr. George Meyer.
Well, good evening.
Welcome, George.
Dr. Jorgen, glad to be here.
I think the last time we sat and talked on a program like this, you were the host.
That's right. It was the other way around.
And I was your guest, yeah. So this is kind of a nice switch. What we're going to talk about this evening is a subject that's near and dear to your heart, I know.
I'm working on it.
City budget.
Yeah.
City budget.
It's an important part of our whole financial experience.
It's a huge part of the municipal experience.
On Community Conversations on WRJ. You want to take a phone call?
Sure, I'll take a phone call.
Good morning, caller. You are on the air.
Good morning.
How can we serve you?
Well, actually, I just had a call and a respond. This is Mayor John DICKERT.
There he is.
Yeah, I sound like him. Yeah, I thought I recognized that voice.
Mayor DICKERT, look at you.
Welcome to the show.
No, well, thank you. I just had to respond because of a couple things, and I'm not asking George to be able to understand the complexity of a development like this, and nor am I asking him for solutions
Far beyond my poor power to comprehend, Mayor.
Now, why don't we go through a little bit of what the budget actually is? And my understanding is there's actually two different parts of the budget. And
Yeah.
those would be...
Whether you have the operating budget and what's called the capital improvements plan.
They're kind of self-explanatory, but capital improvements, I think people understand that's you're investing in things that the city needs. Infrastructure, so on and so forth. But
Exactly.
Hit capital, or not capital, but operating budget for just a minute.
Operating budget then is things like wages and salaries, paper and machinery, and the things that keep things going, as opposed to the structure in which you're operating.
Right.
All right. Now, in business, you normally think of in terms of buildings and machinery as your capital goods, and then the employees and their healthcare plans and wages and that type of that's your operating expenses. So they're really very distinct. When you get into a city, it gets a little trickier because what is an investment? Well, the city really doesn't invest. It's not like a government, not like a business invest,
Yeah.
where you can take and you can put an investment over there and you can put it to work and you can follow it and make sure and see that it's operating. For instance, if Case Manufacturing were to set up a new subdivision or come up with a new tractor or something like that, they could set a building over there, they could put people at it, and they can watch that scene and see, does it make money? Well, the government doesn't
assuming
operate
John Deere doesn't come out with the same product, they might be going guns of fire, you know?
Yeah, that's right.
Make a lot of money.
And then they know down the road. Either they might lose money because John Deere did too good, or they might really take over John Deere, a whole bunch of John Deere's customers and really do well.
Now, who's responsible for the city budget anyway?
And I think this is a really, really important part. And I just, it's the aldermen at the city level.
Mm-hmm.
The aldermen are responsible, and this comes right out of the handbook, by the way. And that you guys, I learned about this handbook by watching this very show. So I hope I hope others can get as much experience out of this show as I learned out of it. But the alderman handbook, and I started digging through it. And there was one particular, there's a lot of good stuff in there, by the way.
Interesting things in that handbook.
Yeah, I'm surprised, it got in there, some very basic fundamental things about government that are really good. But this one particular paragraph, it's a one-sentence paragraph that I have actually read to the council, and I want to read it.
Were they
here
shocked when they heard the news?
No, I think it just kind of bounced off them. It takes a while for something like this to soak in, but if you get it, I think then particularly the council members should understand this. And here's the sentence. In this handbook, he's talking about various objectives and issues that come up that council members have to face. And I know we don't need to get into that, but I just understand when we get to that point what he's talking about. But he says here, the only way that municipalities can effectively address issues is through interactive leadership involving effective team relationships between, now this is the team, he's going to describe 3 parts of the team now. Effective team relationships between the chief executive, the governing body, and staff.
So the chief executive would be the mayor.
He's the mayor.
The governing body is the alderman, the city council.
And then the staff is your administrative staff, okay? Now, what does governing mean?
You
We
got
looked that
me.
up in the dictionary. It means operating things, running things.
Okay.
It's who's making it.
Well, it's kind of like oversight.
It's
Making sure that things run.
Who's making it happen? That's right.
Yeah.
Who's setting policy? Who's determining what's going to happen? All the chief executive does is put it into action. Executive comes from execute, to make it happen. So the governing body, the people that make it, that decide what's going to happen, is the alderman. Making it happen, they turn it over to the staff and the executive to make it happen.
Right.
Now, this is a very critical thing for aldermen to understand and for people to understand when they're talking to their alderman. You want to talk to who's running the city? Who's deciding what goes on in the city? Talk to your alderman. That's the one. It's not the mayor. The alderman decides what's going to happen, and the mayor makes it happen. That's the way it works all the way up the line. Well, go up with the federal government, Congress makes it happen. All the president's supposed to do is put it into action. He's the chief executive, comes from the word execute, which means not to kill people. There's another execute where you execute the plan, right? You make it happen.
Right.
So let's get our dictionary definition.
Yeah, Congress is they're the people that describe what's going to happen, what needs to be done.
Exactly.
The executive makes sure that the staff is doing it.
That's right. The
And
staff is
would be
closer.
all of the
The bureaucrats. It's the bureaucracy.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Now, so understand that people responsible for this budget is the alderman. They're responsible for the entire budget. Now, it's not practical for them to sit down and write a budget.
Why not?
Well, first of all, they don't have the time, and if there's 16 of them, can you imagine? Talk about too many cooks spoiling the stew. That would be it. Can you imagine 16 people deciding whether we should spend $5,000 here or $2,000 here? It would take forever. They'd never get it done.
And I think most of these people are not economists or accountants or anything like that. They're just people who are put forward by their neighbors, or sometimes they put themselves forward to their neighbors.
That's absolutely
to
right.
represent them in city government.
And that very thing is covered here in the manual. We might get to it a little later on. But the thing is that that's true. They are not expected to do that. They establish policy. They decide what's going to happen, even to the degree of how it's going to happen. Whether it's going to be immediately or slowly or whatever. But when it comes to actually getting it done, the actual execution, now you're over to the chief executive and the staff, which includes formulating the budget. So it's important that the aldermen understand this, and I think it's also important that we, the people, understand it. And
well, I can see now where the staff, the various departments, would submit their annual budget. How much money they need to operate their department.
Exactly.
Would go to the city council.
That's right.
And then the city council is in charge of integrating all of that and coming up with a master plan.
That's what they have to do. And if there's some decisions to make, but do we really want? Well, like what came up with, do we need somebody else in city planning? They wanted to hire the city planner wanted to hire somebody else there. Also, that came up was the city attorney wanted to put someone else on staff, and the city attorney. Now, those are relatively big items. They know that a staff, someone hired at that position is going to cost between $100,000 and $150,000. And can we do them both? Should we do one? If we're going to do one, which one should we do? Should we do neither? Instead, put the money over into a community center? Those are decisions that the council has to make. But it's their responsibility. They are the governing body. They are the ones that make the decision. It is not the bureaucracy. It is not the mayor.
Well, just to give the viewers a kind of an understanding of what we're talking about there, how large is the city budget on an annual basis? How much money do we have that we're spending?
The city actually spends $80 million a year.
$80 million.
And this gets really, really difficult to see. Because it's broken apart in so many different things, and some of the stuff that the money that the city spends, part of that $80 million is given to them by the state.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, some of it could be borrowed, some of it could from various sources, and there's a page in the budget describes all that, and then it gets down to $80 million.
How much am I expected to pay?
Well, if you could put in, 2 or 3 million, it'd be really great.
Yeah, that'd be great, yeah. Well, I think the average citizen is, it's primarily our property taxes.
The property tax is one of them.
City budget.
I have a sheet here that says how much.
Yeah, a moment of magic happened there.
That's right. Yeah, but this is page 18 of the budget, if anybody actually wants to look it up. But there is the total expenditures, and it's a little over $80 million.
$80 million.
Just a little over $500,000, only $500,000 over. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
What's $500,000?
What's a $500,000 among friends, you know?
So it's $80
Who
million.
was it? Everett Dirksen that said $1 billion here, $1 billion there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money.
Yeah, I know. But anyway, and you can see that the two major sources of this money is property taxes
and intergovernmental revenues.
Intergovernmental revenues, and that generally means money we're getting from the state. That's the shared revenue plan. Where remember the mayors were crying because, at least our mayor was, that Act 10 had really wrecked us and we're not getting all the shared revenue we need and all this type of stuff. And there's a bunch of other smaller sources like fines and forfeitures. People understand that, licensing and permits.
Fines and forfeitures, that's over $2 million.
Mm-hmm.
What is that, like traffic tickets?
Parking tickets. Unit was good for a couple $100,000 of that. But that's basically fines and forfeitures.
Interesting. So then according to the budget, 31% of expenditures are for debt service.
Yep.
And that is?
Now, debt service is supposed to be the payment of interest and money that you owe.
Okay.
That's supposed to be what it is. This is a false debt service.
Well, I see here, where was it that we pay $14.4 million a year?
That's what it shows. We're paying off in maturities. This is on page.
Now, is that the total of what we owe?
No, the total of what we owe is
this
over
is
here.
just what we pay.
Yeah, here's the total. Here's the principal, outstanding principal of all the debts. $104 million. Page.
Wow.
10. $104 million.
So we owe 104 and we have 80 to work with every year.
Have 80 to work with, and we're paying $3.5 million, which is a pretty good interest rate. That's where you're paying 3.5%.
Yeah,
is roughly what it is. And here is what we're heading for. Our goal for the city is to get rid of that $106 million debt. And then the city will magically, every year, year after year, have an additional $3.5 million to spend. And remember how they cut off people's street lights over there for $80,000? That's $80,000.
Well,
this is $3.5 million.
That's roughly what, about 5% of the total budget is just in interest?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. About 5% will be closer to $4 million. It's a little less than 5%. But the point is that if we can get rid of the debt, the city council, the people who run this government, will have an additional $3.5 million to spend. That's a lot of streetlights. It's a lot of sidewalks. That's a lot for these community centers. They're shutting down community centers for lack of $20,000-$30,000.
How the hell did we get $104 million in debt with an operating budget of $80 million?
When I can find that out and figure it out, then I'm going to write my book.
Yeah, you don't know when this indebtedness actually began.
I don't. I would love to find out where were we? I mean, when we started back with Sandy Knapp, and he was pitching his tent there on the shores of Lake Michigan. There was no debt, and there was no debt for a long time. We didn't have a mayor. We got a register of deeds first, and then we had to get somebody to marry some of these people.
Probably had an animal control officer before we had a mayor.
And finally, after about 60, 70 years, whatever that was, we got a mayor. And then somewhere after that, we started getting a debt. Now
I see where we're paying off $14.4 million every year.
That's
But
what it
then we
says.
go ahead and borrow
Then
it.
we turn right around. That's on page 10. We pay it off, and then we on page 156, 155, we borrow it back. Now it's really hard.
In fact, we're actually borrowing more than we're paying. Right?
Well, there's something wrong there because the debt is going down according to the city administrator. Now, we're getting into some really, really nebulous things here, and somehow we got to figure it out.
Yeah.
And that's
When is the last time there's been an audit on city finances? Do you know?
It's been a long time, and I've read it, but it's been.
Isn't
it's been
that kind of
close to a decade,
routine
is it?
for most municipalities to audit their finances every now and then, occasionally?
Yes, it is, and it should be done. And
did you have any idea why we're not doing that in Racine?
I have the foggiest idea why we wouldn't do that. It's not because the city administrator doesn't want anybody looking at his books, or it's not because the city finance director is hiding anything.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think now this I can say though I feel that it's being deliberately kept nebulous so nobody can figure it out but them. And I've worked with one alderman that was trying to get information on it, and the information he was given was there's 5 different kinds of debts, and it's really, really hard to understand this. But I can show you two or three of them, but the other 2, I'm not sure I can explain it to you. And then finally, he did get an explanation, and it gets really complicated. And when you see stuff like that, things being deliberately obfuscated, look out.
Well,
The truth is in simplicity. This I've learned. When you can look at something simple, there's truth there. When you're making things complicated, that means there's somebody's lying.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion. But at any rate, when we have things like this, 300 pages of budget that the average person can't understand. And we should all be, this is supposed to be a free country. We're supposed to be running, the aldermen are the governing body, but we're supposed to be able to tell the aldermen what we want.
Yeah,
and if we don't understand what's going on, how can we do that? That's right. So this whole thing needs to be figured out, get it down to something simple, and then we can start handling it. Because here's the thing. Why do we get the debt?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong here, George, but I'll try and simplify it here.
Yeah, good.
All right, you and I both work in the same place, all right? We make a good salary.
Okay.
I have a tendency to run out of money.
Okay.
So I come to you on a Monday and I say, George, can I borrow $50 until Friday? I'm a little short this week.
Okay.
You say, sure, Doc. You give me $50.
Uh-huh.
That Friday I pay you $50 back.
And I'm happy. Yeah, good.
Yeah.
I got my $50 back.
And then the next Monday, I'm short again.
Whoa.
So I borrow another $50. But in addition to that, you're telling me, well, yeah, I'll lend you the $50, but I want $55 back on Friday, which is perfectly reasonable because you're helping me out of a bind and a tough situation. Isn't that kind of what the city is doing?
That's what they're doing. That's not true debt service. You look it up in the dictionary. Just look it up in the dictionary, and it says it's payment of debts and interest on and your bills.
Yeah.
Payment on your interest and bills is interest and the debt. That's your debt servicing. I'm saying.
Right.
So when you're actually paying on the debt, but you're borrowing to pay on the debt, that's not true debt servicing.
Right.
So that in itself is not a true. It's not a true picture of debt servicing. The debt servicing is actually much smaller than that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and here's the thing. There's another definition you need to learn. We all need to learn. It's called pay as you go. And this, by the way, is in the dictionary. That phrase, pay as you go. And what it means.
Well, I was using myself as an example. Typically, I do pay as I go.
Yeah,
I know what you're talking
I know.
about.
You were just making up example there, but
You buy something, you give money for it, and you get the goods.
yeah.
And you don't buy something unless you have the money for it. That's pay as you go.
Now here's right out of the Microsoft College Dictionary. System of paying debts or costs as they are incurred.
Right.
That's pay as you go. Now, some
So
people
if I
say,
go fill up my gas tank, I've incurred a debt of maybe $30 to fill up my gas tank.
right,
Pay as you go is
You pay
I
it.
give the guy $30.
That's right. And that's what it means. We're paying your costs and debts or costs.
Yeah.
It depends on how you want to look at them. You can say it was a cost to fill up a gas tank, or just like you did, perfectly legitimate to say, I incurred a debt once I filled that gas tank up. Now, you could do one of two things. You could put it on a credit card, in which case you haven't really paid it off yet.
Right.
Now, the government considers that paying it off. But that's a different story. We'll do a program on that sometime. But anyway, the thing is, you haven't really paid it off yet, have you?
No.
You've gone into debt now.
You just made a promise.
You just made a promise,
Yeah.
right? You've transferred it to your credit card company. Now you got to pay them. But if you pay that as it's incurred, that's called pay as you go. Now,
Right.
some people say, and this is an important aspect of all this. I want people to understand this, and then get your alderman to understand it. And now we're really making some headway. People ask, well, the government has to borrow money though in order to get things done. That's why we went into debt. We wanted to have more roads and more buildings, so we went into debt. And so we can't go on a pay-as-you-go. Well, here is the truth. Now, mark this. We are already in the city of Racine on a pay-as-you-go basis. Now you say, wait a minute, there's a $106 million debt, $104 million. Now, I understand that's there. But we are on a pay-as-you-go basis. You know why? Because we can't borrow any more money without getting into some serious trouble with our bond rating and that type of stuff. And our debt is actually going down. The city administrator, Tom Friedel, has actually brought it down the last 4 or 5 years. It decreases a little bit each year.
Oh, well, good for him.
So therefore, if
Good
we
for
aren't
us.
incurring more debt, we are on a debt pay-as-you-go basis. But we're still paying that $3.5 million a year in interest. So we're on a pay-as-you-go basis, but with a $3.5 million a year penalty.
I understand.
Now, if we get rid of the $104 million debt, let's decide how we're going to do that for right now. We're going to figure that out, though. But if we get rid of that,
maybe somebody would lend us the money.
there you go. Yeah, that's what's right. But if we get rid of the let's say when we get rid of the $104 million debt, now we no longer have to pay that $3.5 million interest. Stay on a pay-as-you-go basis. Once you get rid of it, stay there. And now, guess what? The council has an additional $3.5 million every year to spend. Remember those street lights they shut off for $80,000?
Yeah.
Remember the community center they shut down for $80,000, $70,000, whatever it was? And the sidewalks, there was a big stir about for $300,000. We're talking $3.5 million a year. Solves a lot of problems. That's our goal. That's our first goal. Get rid of that debt. Now, in order to get rid of the debt, the best thing to do is work on capital expenditures. That's where you get into two types of budgets that you brought up earlier in the thing. You have the operating budget. Remember we talked about that? The operating budget, that's salaries and wages and healthcare plans.
Pretty tough
and all
to make
that
any
stuff.
dent in the operating
That's
budget.
really hard because there's, that's the thing that's happening. That's the cop out there. That's the person collecting the taxes or whatever. That's the thing that's happening.
Could we fire the tax collector?
Why didn't I think of that?
Probably wouldn't work.
But the other side is the capital improvements plan, and that's where you get into things like road construction, buildings like arenas,
Yeah.
and that's where we look at that capital
Rehabbing
improvements
City
plan.
Hall.
That's right.
Yeah.
All those bathrooms.
A new safety building.
That's right.
Yeah.
See, now we're talking big money, and if we
Or tax incentives to construction projects like Machinery Row or the Porter Project.
Exactly.
Yeah.
See, now we're cooking, and that's where we want to direct our efforts. Is not the operating budget. We want to look at the capital improvements plan, which is a great big sheet here of nothing but figures. And it's got, I can't pull it out right now, but it's got $400 million in planned expenditures over the next 10 years.
Oh my God.
$400 million planned in
That's
expenditures.
0.4 of a billion. You know what? I think we should probably wrap up this segment at this point. I think we've kind of gotten enough information here for people to soak up.
Here it is.
And,
You can put this on the screen.
Yeah.
If you want to see it. But there it is, folks. $400 million $426,704,296 in 10 years.
Yeah.
That's where we're going to save our money. That's how we're going to get rid of the $106 million debt. That's how we're going to have $3.5 million a year to spend, and we're going to be able to turn our streetlights back on, reopen our community centers, and just have some fun.
All right. Next time we'll talk about how we're going to try and save that $400 million.
I'm with you all the way.
All right. Sounds good. That's it for tonight.
Thanks. Yep.
Thanks for watching. Thanks for being here, George. It's been a pleasure.
Been a pleasure for me, too.
Good night.
Good night.
You're coming in Friday morning, right?
Yeah, and I'm not going to talk about George because the reality is, unfortunately, he just keeps throwing out lies and misinformation.